For 12-year-old Alara, a simple boast about her mother's heroic job was just the truth, until police officers' mocking laughter in a crowded store turned her pride into a humiliating lie, forcing her to stand alone until the sound of her mother's boots on the tile changed everything. It's funny how the biggest moments of your life always start in the most ordinary ways. There's no fanfare, no warning sign. You're just living, and then suddenly, the world tilts. For Isla Vance, the world tilted in the shoe aisle of the Summit Sporting Goods store. The air smelled like new rubber and clean floor wax. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off the polished tile in a way that made the whole place feel bright and endless. Ilara, 12 years old and all elbows and knees, was deep in the important business of being a kid. She stood surrounded by towering walls of shoe boxes, a colorful fortress of potential. Next to her, her best friend Chloe was holding up a bright blue sneaker, arguing its merits with the seriousness of a general planning a campaign. "But the tread is better on these," Chloe insisted, pointing at the sole. Ilara just shrugged, flipping a shoebox lid shut with a soft thump. "I don't know. I still like the red Nikes better." Her voice was casual, easy. This was her world. School, sneakers, and the simple, sprawling conversations that filled the space between. It was a good world. Then, without even thinking, she offered up a piece of her truth. It was just a fact of her life, as normal as the color of the sky. "My mom's not picking me up until she's done at Fort Hood," she explained, her attention still half on the shoes. "She's in Special Forces, so sometimes her schedule's just crazy." Chloe blinked, her debate about treads forgotten. Her eyes went wide with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Wait, your mom's in the Army? Like actually fighting?" "Yeah," Ilara said, with the same easy tone she'd used to talk about her favorite pizza topping. "She's Master Sergeant Isla Vance. She just got back from a mission overseas. It was a long one. It should have been a simple moment. A kid, proud of her parent, sharing a cool fact with her friend. It's a scene that plays out in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different places, every single day. But that's when the sound cut through the air. It was laughter, but not the good kind. Not the kind that bubbles up from joy. This was sharp, dismissive. It was a sound meant to shrink things, to make them small. Ilara's head turned. A few feet away, flipping through a rack of hoodies, as if he owned the place, was a man. He was off duty, dressed in jeans and a faded University of Texas t-shirt. But his badge was clipped to his belt, a shiny piece of metal that seemed to catch the light on purpose. He looked like any other weekend shopper, but the laugh was his. It was loud, and it had drawn the attention of other people in the aisle. The man, Officer Dean Holloway, shook his head with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Special Forces?" he said, the words dripping with mockery. "Come on, kid. I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I can tell you right now, there's no way your mom is running around with those guys." He paused, his eyes narrowing just a fraction as he looked Ilara up and down. "Especially not someone like her." The words hung in the air. Someone like her. They stung, but the tone stung more. It was a tone you'd use for a toddler who insisted their imaginary friend was real. A hot flush crept up Ilara's neck, coloring her cheeks. Her lips pressed together into a thin, tight line. She became acutely aware of the space around her. A woman with a toddler in her cart had stopped nearby, pretending to sort through a bin of socks, but her ears were practically twitching. A pair of teenagers by the water bottles had stopped whispering to each other and were now openly watching. Chloe leaned closer, her voice a low, nervous hum. "Just ignore him, Ilara. He doesn't know." But ignoring him felt impossible. He was a force in the aisle, and he wasn't finished. Officer Holloway chuckled again, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Look, I get it. Kids have big imaginations. My nephew used to tell everyone his dad was an astronaut. Same kind of thing. It's cute, but it's not real." The heat of embarrassment was a physical thing now, crawling up Ilara's skin. She wanted to speak, to defend her mom, to list the facts she knew by heart. The callous hands, the shadow box of medals at home, the way her mom carried herself with a quiet power that commanded respect. But every word jammed in her throat, trapped by the sheer weight of his disbelief. Her hands trembled as she shoved the shoebox she was holding back onto the shelf. The cardboard scraped loudly against the metal display. "Why would you say that in front of everybody?" Chloe whispered, her voice tight with secondhand anxiety. Ilera swallowed hard, the motion painful. "Because it's true." That small, defiant statement, quiet but steady, seemed to amuse Holloway even more. He tilted his head, now addressing the small, unofficial circle of strangers who had become their audience. "See? That's the dedication I'm talking about. Sticking to the story." He winked at a man looking at baseball gloves. "Look, sweetheart, there's nothing wrong with wanting your mom to be a hero, but you don't have to invent fairy tales." Fairy tales. The word landed like a slap. Her mother's life, her sacrifices, her strength, all reduced to a fairy tale. Ilera's mother was the most real person she knew. A woman who could kiss a scraped knee with gentle hands one day and navigate a war zone the next. But standing there, under the relentless fluorescent lights, she had no way to prove it. And Holloway, with a smug grin, knew it. He felt he'd won. "Tell you what," he said, tapping his badge with a finger. "If your mom's really special forces, maybe she should come by the station sometime. We could always use a good laugh." Ilera's chest tightened. She felt small, incredibly small. Her voice cracked when she finally managed to push a few words out. "You don't know anything about her." The sentence hung there, fragile and defiant. Holloway's smile faltered for just a heartbeat, but he recovered quickly, clapping his hands together as if the matter was settled. "Sure, kid, whatever you say." Around them, the shoppers exchanged looks. Some were amused, some were uncomfortable, but no one stepped forward. No one said, "I believe her." No one said, "Leave the girl alone." The silence was worse than the laughter. It was a blanket of complicity, magnifying Ilera's humiliation until it felt like the only thing in the world. Chloe tugged at her sleeve. "Ilera, maybe we should just wait outside." But Ilera's sneakers felt glued to the linoleum. This wasn't just about being embarrassed anymore. This was about her mom. It was about her truth, her pride, and she was watching it be mocked and dismantled in public. It made her chest burn with a feeling she didn't have a name for. Still, she lowered her eyes to the patterned floor tiles. What could she really do? She was just a kid. But what Ilera didn't know, as she stood there wishing for the ground to swallow her whole, was that the moment she ached for her mother to appear, Master Sergeant Isla Vance was already on her way. Her boots were already striking the tile floor of the Apex Plaza, and with every step, she was moving closer to turning this entire humiliating scene on its head. The world, for Ilera, had shrunk to the few square feet of scuffed linoleum between the sneaker display and the rack of hoodies. The bright, cheerful store now felt like a cage, every corner filled with watching eyes. She could feel them on her skin, a prickling heat of shame and anger. She shifted her weight, hugging her arms around herself, a futile attempt to make herself smaller, to disappear. But Officer Holloway's voice was a spotlight, and it held her fast. It carried through the air, bouncing off shelves of basketballs and racks of jerseys with an easy, infuriating clarity. He had leaned back against the display now, settling in as if he were the host of this terrible, impromptu show. "You know," he said, that half smile still plastered on his face, "people don't realize the kind of training it takes to make it into special forces. Years of grueling work, combat deployments. It's the best of the best." He shook his head, a parody of seriousness. "It's not exactly the kind of job you hear about at PDA meetings." He laughed again, a short, sharp sound. "And you expect me to believe your mom is one of them?" The words weren't just dismissive now. They were a deliberate twisting of a knife. They wormed their way into Ilera's chest and tightened into a hard, painful knot. She wished desperately that she could explain. She wanted to talk about the empty chair at the dinner table for months on end, the letters written on thin blue paper. The way her mom's hugs felt different when she first came home, tighter, longer, as if she was memorizing the feeling. But the words were trapped, choked off by his mocking stare and the silent, expectant audience. Chloe, loyal, brave Chloe, glanced nervously at the other shoppers. "We should just go," she whispered, her voice thin with anxiety. This time, Ilara shook her head. A stubbornness, born from a well of love for her mother, was hardening inside her. Her throat was tight, but she forced the words out. I don't care if you believe me. My mom doesn't need your approval. It was a good line. It should have been the end of it. But Holloway wasn't a man who let a child have the last word. He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel like a vile secret, but still loud enough for everyone to hear. Listen, sweetheart, I know you want to feel proud, but making up stories isn't the way. People are going to laugh. He paused, letting the cruelty of his next words sink in. And honestly, a little girl like you doesn't know what real sacrifice looks like. Ilara's ears burned. The tears she'd been fighting finally welled up, blurring the colorful sneaker boxes into a watery mosaic. Chloe put a hand on her sleeve, but Ilara pulled away gently, her small fists clenching at her sides. From across the aisle, a man in a baseball cap muttered, "Just let the kid be, man." But his voice was a feather against a brick wall. Holloway ignored him completely. Ilara swallowed, gathering the shattered pieces of her courage. "You're wrong about her," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "You're wrong about everything." That earned another laugh from Holloway, but this one was different. It wasn't just amusement. It was the sound of someone who believed utterly in his own victory. He looked around the store, almost inviting the crowd to share in his triumph. "Wrong, kid. I've worked side by side with real heroes. I've met soldiers. The guys who actually go overseas do the dangerous stuff. And trust me," he said, his eyes sweeping over her one last time, "they don't look like your mom." The air left Ilara's lungs. The unspoken meaning of his words, a woman, a black woman, hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Chloe gasped, "That's not fair. You don't even know her." Holloway turned his gaze on her, his grin spreading. "And you do? What? Did you two sit around swapping war stories? Please. I've been in uniform longer than you two have been alive. I think I know what's real and what's made up." Chloe shrank back under the assault, but Ilara stood her ground, her hands trembling at her sides. "You'll see," she whispered, the statement of fragile prayer. "She's coming." The officer smirked. "Sure she is. Maybe she'll parachute right through the skylight, huh?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't worry, kid. You'll learn. The world's tough. Better to face the truth now than keep living in make-believe." The whispers grew louder. Ilara saw a woman pretending to look at yoga pants, her phone angled subtly toward them. A teenage boy near the checkout was no longer hiding his recording. The humiliation was a physical weight, a heavy backpack of shame she couldn't take off. For a fleeting second, she wished she had never spoken. Maybe her mom was right to ask for privacy. But then she saw Holloway's smirk, and the burn in her chest returned, hotter than before. She wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand, and stood as tall as her 12-year-old frame would allow. "You'll see," she repeated, firmer this time. Holloway leaned back, folding his arms. "We'll see, huh? All right, then. I'll wait." The silence that followed was deafening. It was a vacuum, sucking in all the sound until even the generic pop music over the speakers seemed to fade away. Every second stretched into an eternity. The crowd was a single, held breath. Some waited for Ilara to break. She didn't. She just stood, fighting the tremor in her legs. And that's when she heard it. Faint at first, then growing clearer with each passing second. A sound cutting through the thick silence, not with noise, but with purpose. Step, step, step. It was the sound of boots on tile, not the shuffling of sneakers or the clack of dress shoes. These were steady, measured, and unmistakable. They struck the floor with a confident, rhythmic certainty that made heads turn toward the store's entrance. Officer Holloway heard it too. His smirk didn't fade at first. He assumed it was just another shopper. But as the sound drew nearer, his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. The casual lean against the rack became a little straighter. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't dare look, afraid it was a trick of her own hoping ears. Then, the small crowd near the aisle's entrance parted, and there she was, Master Sergeant Isla Vance moved through the space not as if she owned it, but as if she commanded it. Her camouflage uniform was crisp, every crease sharp, every patch, the American flag, her name, her rank, sewn on with precision. A beret was tucked neatly under her arm. She had come straight from a ceremony at Fort Hood, and the aura of formality and authority she carried was a tangible force. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the store. They passed over the racks of clothes, the line of checkout counters, and then stopped. They locked onto the scene frozen in the sneaker aisle. Her daughter, face flushed and tear-streaked, fists clenched. Her friend, looking scared and defensive, and the man in the off-duty police uniform, standing with his arms crossed amidst a circle of onlookers. In 3 long, sure strides, Isla closed the distance. Her boots, those same boots that just announced her arrival, fell silent as she stopped beside her daughter. Her hand, warm and firm, came to rest on Alara's shoulder. The touch was an anchor. The tension in Alara's body didn't vanish, but it suddenly had something solid to hold on to. Mom! Alara breathed, the word a mixture of relief, shame, and a desperate need for everything to be okay. Isla's voice was calm, but it carried through the silence like a clear bell. What's going on? Holloway straightened up fully now, his bravado trying to reassert itself. He forced a polite, dismissive smile. Evening, ma'am. Just clearing up a little misunderstanding with your daughter here. Isla's eyes didn't leave his face. She didn't look at the crowd. She focused entirely on him, and the intensity of that focus was unnerving. She gently squeezed Alara's shoulder, a silent command to speak. The dam broke. He said you couldn't be who you are, that I made it up. He laughed at me. The words tumbled out, raw and painful. Holloway gave a chuckle that sounded strained, nervous. Kids, you know how they are. Big imaginations. I was just having a little fun with her. Isla's voice remained even, but it was like a scalpel. You mocked my daughter in front of strangers and called her a liar. The man's shoulder stiffened. Now hold on. I didn't call her that. I just said she might be stretching the truth. And you decided it was a joke. Isla interrupted, her head tilting slightly. Tell me, officer? She let the title hang in the air, her eyes flicking to the badge on his belt. What exactly made it so funny? The store was utterly silent. The confrontation was no longer between a man and a child. It was just beginning, and the balance of power had just irrevocably shifted. The air in the store, which had been thick with tension, was now absolutely still. It was a kind of silence that feels heavy, like the moment before a thunderclap. All eyes were fixed on the 2 figures in uniform, but the dynamic had completely flipped. Officer Holloway was no longer the relaxed, mocking authority figure. He was a man caught in a spotlight he hadn't intended to turn on himself. Isla Vance didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence was enough. Her hand remained on Alara's shoulder, a steady, grounding weight. She studied Holloway, her gaze calm but utterly unyielding. Officer Holloway, she began, her tone measured, I don't know you. You don't know me. Yet you saw fit to laugh at my daughter, to dismiss her in front of strangers. Why? Holloway licked his lips, his eyes darting briefly to the surrounding faces. The confidence he'd worn so easily was gone, replaced by a desperate search for an exit. Look, Sergeant, I wasn't trying to... I just thought she was exaggerating. Kids do that. Exaggerating, Isla repeated, the word hanging in the air. Exaggerating is saying your mom makes the best pancakes in the world. Exaggerating is telling your friends you can climb a mountain. My daughter didn't exaggerate. She told you who I am. And instead of listening, you laughed. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The woman with the toddler nodded firmly. Holloway forced out a weak laugh. All right, maybe I shouldn't have laughed. But you got to understand, it caught me off guard. I mean, special forces. Isla leaned forward just a fraction, but it was enough to make him lean back. What about special forces caught you off guard? That my daughter knows the term? Or that she used it to describe me? He hesitated. That pause was louder than any shout. It was an admission. Isla's voice dropped, becoming quieter, more personal, yet every syllable carried to the rapt audience. You assumed, she said, her word precise and sharp. Because I'm a woman, you couldn't imagine someone like me holding that title. So you mocked my daughter to protect your own narrow assumptions. Holloway's face flushed a deep crimson. His eyes darted around, looking for a friendly face and finding none. I never said anything about that. You're putting words in my mouth. You didn't have to say it, Isla replied, her voice returning to its normal volume. She straightened up, addressing not just him, but everyone listening. Your laugh said it for you. A few people in the crowd nodded. The man in the baseball cap said, she's right, loud enough for everyone to hear this time. Holloway's jaw flexed. Fine, maybe I came across wrong. I'll admit that, but I didn't mean any harm. Isla glanced down at Alara, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and swelling pride, then back at him. Intent doesn't erase impact, officer. She stood here while a grown man with a badge turned her truth into public entertainment. Do you have any idea how small that can make a child feel? Alara felt her chest tighten, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from a fierce, burning pride. Her mom was speaking the words that had been trapped inside her own heart. Isla let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of her question to settle. I've served my country for 18 years. I've led soldiers through situations you will never see. I've made decisions that carry the weight of life and death. I wear this uniform because I earned it. Every stripe, every insignia. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd before returning to Holloway. And yet, one of the hardest battles I fight is right here at home, convincing people like you that my existence is not a joke. The words were not angry. They were heavy with a weary truth that resonated deeply with everyone who heard them. Holloway's face fell. Any last shred of argument evaporated. He simply looked defeated. Isla turned slightly, her gaze taking an entire store. This isn't just about me. It's about what happens when someone decides their assumptions matter more than someone else's truth. My daughter shouldn't have to defend my career to strangers. She shouldn't have to stand here fighting back tears because a man couldn't imagine her words being real. A quiet, spontaneous clap broke the silence. It was a woman who had been holding the basket, her hands coming together once, twice, before she stopped, slightly embarrassed. The gesture was enough. Holloway rubbed the back of his neck. All right, point taken. Isla looked at him one last time, her expression stern, but not cruel. Next time, remember that respect costs you nothing, but its absence can cost a child everything. She then turned her attention fully to him, her voice firm. But we're not done. If you want this to be over, you will apologize. Not to me, to her. You look at my daughter, and you apologize directly. The weight of the moment pressed down on Holloway. All eyes were on him. He glanced at Alara, who met his gaze, her chin held high. He cleared his throat, the sound awkward in the quiet. Sorry, kid. Try again, Isla said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. He swallowed hard, his face a mass of discomfort. Finally, he looked directly at Alara, his shoulders slumping in surrender. Alara, he said, his voice louder, clearer. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed at you. I shouldn't have said what I said. You told the truth, and I didn't believe you. That was wrong. The apology hung in the air, real and tangible. Alara felt a wave of relief, so powerful it made her knees feel weak. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked up at her mom. Isla gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was over. As the crowd began to slowly disperse, the atmosphere shifted. The tension dissolved, replaced by a quiet, respectful awe. A few shoppers paused as they passed. Thank you for your service, ma'am. One man said quietly. Your daughter is very brave, another woman added. Smiling at Alara, Isla acknowledged them with a simple nod, her focus already returning to her daughter. You ready to go? She asked, her voice soft now, filled with a warmth that had been absent during the confrontation. Alara nodded, finally allowing a small, genuine smile to touch her lips. Yeah. As they walked toward the exit, Chloe clutching Alara's hand, the world seemed to have righted itself. The same store that felt like a prison minutes ago was now just a store again. People looked at them with admiration, not ridicule. Once they were out in the bustling mall, the sound of food courted a welcome normality. Isla slowed her pace and bent down so her face was level with Ilara's. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching her daughter's. "I am now," Ilara whispered. "I hated it, though." "I know," Isla said, brushing a stray curl from Ilara's forehead. "But what you did today, standing your ground when it was hard, that's a different kind of courage. I'm so proud of you." Tears welled in Ilara's eyes again, but this time they were tears of release. "He said I was living in a fairy tale." Isla's expression hardened for a fleeting second before softening into something fierce and loving. "Listen to me, Ilara. Never, ever let anyone laugh you out of your own truth. Your story is yours to tell. If someone can't handle it, that's their failure, not yours. Promise me you'll remember that." Ilara looked into her mother's eyes, seeing the strength, the sacrifice, the love. "I promise." Isla kissed the top of her head. By the time they reached the car, the heavy weight of the afternoon had lifted, leaving behind a lesson etched into Ilara's heart. As they drove away from the Apex Plaza, the setting sun casting long shadows, Ilara leaned back in her seat. She replayed the sound of her mother's boots on the tile, the sound that cut through the laughter and changed everything. She had learned that the truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs the courage to be spoken and sometimes the love to be defended. And for everyone who witnessed it in that store that day, the lesson lingered long after the sliding doors hissed shut. That respect is a choice, and choosing to withhold it can leave a scar, but choosing to give it can change a life. And so, in the end, the loudest sound in that store wasn't the laughter or the arguments. It was a quiet, powerful truth of a child who refused to be silenced, and a mother who taught everyone present that the greatest strength isn't found in a uniform, but in the courage to stand by your own story. If this story of courage and truth resonated with you, if it reminded you of the power in standing tall, then like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Until next time, remember, never let anyone laugh you out of your own truth.